On the morning of the 3rd of March 2018, a woman named Carol Whitfield drove to her brother's house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, to drop off his birthday cake. Thomas Whitfield was turning 52. He had specifically requested his sister's lemon cake, the one she had been making for every family birthday. Since 1987, Carol had gotten up at 6 a.m. to bake it. She arrived at his house at 9:15 inches the morning, carrying the cake in both hands and smiling. She had not spoken to Thomas in 4 days. That was unusual. Thomas called her every single day, had done so for 30 years. But Carol had told herself he was probably just busy. He had a new job, a new routine, a lot going on. She rang the doorbell with her elbow. No answer. She rang it again. Still nothing. She set the cake down on the porch step and knocked hard on the door. Silence. Carol walked around to the back of the house and found the back door unlocked. She went inside. She called out Thomas's name. No answer. She walked through the kitchen, through the hallway, to the foot of the stairs, and then she stopped because there was a smell in that house that Carol had never encountered before. In her 54 years on this earth, she did not go upstairs. She walked back outside. She sat on the porch step next to the birthday cake, and she called 911. Thomas Whitfield had been born in Columbus, Ohio in 1966. He was the youngest of 3 siblings, his older sister Carol, his older brother James. Their father worked at a paper mill. Their mother was a school librarian. Thomas was the quiet one, not shy, just thoughtful. He was the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people paid attention, because whatever he said was worth hearing. In high school, he developed a passion for woodworking. He could take a piece of raw timber and turn it into something that looked like it belonged in a museum. His mother still had a jewelry box he made her when he was 17. She kept it on her dresser until the day she died. Thomas married young. His wife's name was Patricia. They met at church when Thomas was 23. They were married within a year, and for a long time, it was a good marriage. They had 2 children, a son named Marcus, who was born in 1993, and a daughter named Lily, who was born in 1996. Thomas coached Marcus's little league teams. He built Lily a dollhouse by hand for her 5th birthday. It had working doors and hand-painted window frames and a little porch with a rocking chair. Lily said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She kept it in her room until she was 14, but by 2008, the marriage had quietly collapsed. Not dramatically, not with screaming or accusations, just slowly, like something that had been leaning against a wall for years, finally running out of wall. Patricia told Thomas she had been unhappy for a long time. Thomas said he had known. They separated that summer. The divorce was finalized in 2009. It was remarkably civil. For a divorce, both of them agreed that the children came first. Both of them meant it. Thomas got the kids every other weekend, and 2 weeks in the summer. He never missed a single visit. Not one, even when he was sick, even when work was brutal, even when the drive was difficult. He showed up every time. Marcus would later say that his father was the most reliable person he had ever known, that you could set a clock by his father, that his father never once made him feel like a second priority. After the divorce, Thomas threw himself into his woodworking. He converted his garage into a full workshop. He started selling pieces at local markets, then online. Within 3 years, he had more orders than he could fill. He hired 2 assistants. He moved into a larger space. By 2015, Thomas Whitfield Woodworks had a 6-month waiting list and clients in 11 states. He was not a rich man, but he was doing exactly what he loved and providing well for himself. He bought a small house in the same neighborhood where his kids had grown up, so they always knew where to find him. His neighbor, Janet, would later describe Thomas as the kind of neighbor you hope for and rarely get. She said he shoveled her driveway every winter without being asked. She said he fixed her fence when a storm knocked it down. She said in 12 years, she had never once heard him raise his voice. In 2016, something happened to Thomas that his sister Carol described as the first time in his life she saw him truly happy again. His daughter Lily moved back to Columbus. She had spent 2 years in Seattle working at a graphic design firm, but she missed home. She moved into an apartment 10 minutes from Thomas's house, and she and her father began spending every Sunday together. They would go to the farmer's market in the morning, then back to his house, where Thomas would cook and Lily would sit at the kitchen counter, and they would talk for hours. Carol said watching them together was one of the most beautiful things she had ever seen. She said Thomas came alive around Lily, that the sadness that had settled into him after the divorce lifted when she was near. Lily had inherited her father's quietness, his thoughtfulness, his way of making people feel like the most important person in the room. She was 22 years old. She was kind. She was his daughter, and Thomas adored her beyond any measure. In January 2018, Lily began dating a man named Connor Marsh. Connor was 31 years old. He had moved to Columbus from Pittsburgh 6 months earlier. He told Lily he worked in finance. He was charming, well-dressed, confident in the way that some people are confident when they have never been told no. Thomas met Connor for the first time in February 2018. He came to one of their Sunday dinners. Thomas cooked his best meal. He was warm and welcoming. He asked Connor questions and listened carefully to the answers. After Connor left that evening, Lily asked her father what he thought. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's very charming. Lily waited for more. Thomas just smiled and changed the subject. Carol would later say that Thomas had a gift for reading people, that he could see things others couldn't, that he almost never said anything unkind about anyone, but when he went quiet about someone, it meant something. 3 weeks later, Thomas told Carol he was worried about Lily. He said Connor was calling her constantly, that he had started coming to her apartment without being invited, that twice in the past week, Thomas had driven past Lily's building at her request because she had heard someone in the hallway and was frightened, and both times, Connor's car was parked outside. Thomas had confronted Connor quietly, privately, without drama. He had asked Connor directly to give Lily space. Connor had smiled and said of course, and then the following night had shown up at Lily's apartment at 11 p.m. unannounced. Thomas called the police. On February 27th, he filed a report about the harassment. The officer who took the report told Thomas that without a physical threat, there was very little they could do. Thomas thanked him. He drove home. He called Lily. He told her he loved her. He told her he would figure this out. He told her not to worry. That was the last conversation Lily ever had with her father. On the 3rd of March 2018, when Carol went upstairs in Thomas's house, after the police arrived, she was asked to wait outside. The detective who came down 20 minutes later would tell her that Thomas had been in his bedroom, that he had been dead for approximately 4 days, that there were signs of a significant struggle. Carol asked if Thomas had suffered. The detective did not answer. What investigators pieced together over the following 72 hours was this: Connor Marsh had come to Thomas's house on the evening of February 27th, the same day Thomas had filed the police report. Connor knew about the report. Lily had told him not to warn him because Connor had asked her to tell him everything her father did, and Lily, who was 22 years old and in love for the first time and did not yet understand what she was inside of, had told him. Connor came to the house that evening under the pretense of wanting to talk. Thomas let him in because Thomas was the kind of man who believed in talking, who believed in giving people the opportunity to be better, who believed that most conflicts could be resolved if people were willing to sit down and be honest with each other. He let Connor in. He offered him coffee. He sat down across from him, and Connor attacked him. The forensic evidence would later indicate that Thomas fought back with everything he had, that the struggle lasted several minutes, that Thomas Whitfield, who was 51 years old and built furniture for a living and had hands like a craftsman, did not go without a fight. But Connor was younger and had come prepared, and Thomas, who had never in his life expected the person sitting across from him to want him dead, did not have enough time to fully understand what was happening. Connor Marsh was arrested 11 days later, in Pittsburgh, where he had driven immediately after leaving Columbus, he had used Thomas's credit card twice on the way. He was 31 years old. He had 2 prior restraining orders from women in Pittsburgh that Thomas had not known about, that the police in Columbus had not found when Thomas filed his report, that Lily had not known about. Connor Marsh was convicted of first-degree murder in November 2019. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction when the verdict was read. At sentencing, Lily Whitfield stood up in court. She spoke for 9 minutes. She talked about Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. She talked about the jewelry box her father made when he was 17. She talked about the dollhouse with the working doors and the hand-painted window frames and the little rocking chair on the porch. She said she still had it. She said she would never get rid of it. She said she would like to see Connor Marsh spend every remaining day of his life in a room smaller than the room where her father died. Then she sat down. Carol Whitfield still makes the lemon cake. Every March 3rd, she sits at her kitchen table. She eats 1 slice. She wraps the rest carefully, and she drives to the cemetery where Thomas is buried. She leaves the cake at the base of his headstone. She sits for a while. She talks to him. She tells him about Marcus and his new job. She tells him about Lily and how she is doing. She tells him she still thinks of him every single day. Then she gets up. She drives home, and the following morning, she calls James, her other brother, because Thomas used to call her every day for 30 years, and someone still has to. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because we have more, and they only get darker.